on both sides of the ball, especially offensively, where they're 9 points per game worse without it. All right, Woj tweeting this morning. NBA executive VP Joe Dumars tells ESPN on Draymond Green punishment, quote, here's what it came down to: excessive and over-the-top actions, conduct detrimental, and a repeat offender. That's what separates this, where you end up with a suspension. He continues in the next tweet. DeMarsh to ESPN on weighing the circumstances of the Warriors down 2-0 to the Kings in the series. You know what the situation is, but you have to set that aside and look at the facts in front of you. Repeat offender weighs as heavy as anything. Okay.
I just want to point out before we get into the subject, the irony of it. I've known Joe Dumars for decades. Love the man. Very happy that he's in the position that he's in. But who is he a former member of?
I was just going to say that.
Wow.
You feel like it's hypocrisy?
Wow.
It's the Pistons and Lane Beer.
Wow. Emma Horn.
Right?
Sally, Rodman.
Isaiah wasn't an angel.
Isaiah. Yep. I mean, listen, I think they don't get enough praise, what they meant to the NBA, because everybody talks about, Boston and L.A., and then it's Michael Jordan. They're forgetting that the Pistons interrupted everything. Obviously, the Sixers in 83, but they're forgetting that the Pistons disrupted everything. But my goodness, it's just the irony of that statement coming from a bad boy Piston. Wow.
All right.
Wow. I'll talk to Joe about that.
JJ, let me ask you this. What implications will this suspension have on the Warriors?
Well, the implications in the short term is that Game 3 turns into a must-win. If they can win that game without Draymond, I still believe they have a chance to win this series. If they go down 3-0, history tells us it's over. It's particularly because Golden State is not a good road team defensively. Let's talk big picture, though. And let's just I don't want to do the hypothetical, but let's just say the Warriors lose to the Kings. I think the long-term implications of this is that there's got to be a different roster construction at those positions, at the 4 and the 5. When the Warriors dynasty started in 2015, there were still a lot of teams, I know I was on one of them, that still played two bigs, two non-shooting bigs. And if you look around the league right now, how many good teams play two non-shooting bigs? I can think of one, and that's Cleveland, right? Evan Mobley and Jared Allen. They don't shoot threes. They don't space the floor. Okay. But there's two guys who are so good defensively, as are Draymond and Kevon Looney. I think the long-term implication is you can't go into next season with two non-shooters in the starting lineup because the rest of the league has caught up to you. And I think about Mike Brown, who spent years with Steve Kerr and has been in coaches' meetings, in playoff series. And yeah, you talk about the other team. You talk about strategy and X's and O's. You also talk about your own players. He's got a treasure trove of information stored up, a scouting report that none of us have on the Golden State Warriors. And he's taking advantage of the fact that they start two non-shooters in the starting lineup. And we've seen that bear out. It's putting too much pressure. As good as Steph and Clay are, if you can be physical like the Kings have been, if you're going to allow that, it's putting too much pressure on them to make tough shots when you have two non-shooters in the starting lineup. I really believe that if they end up losing this series, there may be a change. And I don't know, I'm not saying it's going to be Draymond Green. I think Draymond Green is a Hall of Famer. He's one of the best defensive players ever. I think he's the best defensive player of our era. I think they should bring him back, sign him to a long-term deal. As long as Steph Curry's there, they've got a window to continue this run. But there's got to be a change. They need more shooting. As crazy as that sounds, they need more shooting. They need more spacing on the offensive end.
There's nothing to disagree about with what you said, but you left a few things out. Number one, like you said about Draymond, he's going to look for a contract in excess of $100 million over the next 4 years, whatever. Personally speaking, in today's NBA market, I think he deserves that. Certainly not $200 million, but of course over $100 million in today's NBA market, with elite as he is defensively, even though he's not what he was years ago, he's still one of the better ones today. Definitely. Whether or not they're going to do that remains to be seen because they paid Wiggins, they paid Poole. The other thing, here's what I think you left out. Kevon Looney doesn't necessarily have to start, but with Steve Kerr. Steve Kerr loves this man. Loves Kevon Looney. Love him to death. Don't ever want him to go. I mean, he loves him as a player, loves him as a person. It's like a hero to Steve Kerr, for crying out loud. Steve Kerr loves this dude. That's a decision that they're going to have to make. And I don't. He's the kind of person. He's such class personified. He'll come off the bench if you need him. If you go out there and find that extra big that can do some things for you. Okay. So I wanted to bring that up. When you look at Golden State and you're talking about those two bigs, that's one point. The other thing is that you left out the part about this with Mike Brown. You said in the first part of the show, J.J. Redick, that Draymond's been baited. Mm-hmm. Well, who came up with that strategy? That would be Mike Brown.
Right.
Fine, De'Aaron Fox didn't come up with that. Malik Monk didn't come up with that. Sabonis, with all the antics that he's known to pull off in Indiana and now in Sacramento, he didn't come up with that. That's Mike Brown. See, I left that out. This man knows this team. He was an assistant coach for Steve Kerr. He knows Draymond intimately. He knows these players. If anybody can know how to bait Draymond Green, who would know it better than Mike Brown outside of the folks on the Warriors? So we have to understand that. And we also be clear, it ain't beyond them to bait Clay a little bit too. Because Clay, obviously one of the greatest shooters we've ever seen, obviously an individual that has walked around feeling underappreciated for quite some time, and deservedly so because he is underappreciated. That man is great. But you can get Clay to a point, time to time, not when it really matters, but time to time, where you could egg him on a little bit and get him to get out of character and maybe 4 shots that he normally would be a little bit more patient about, making that extra pass, getting it back, then shooting it then as opposed to launching in somebody's face. These are the kind of things that Mike Brown are doing. And that's what we need to pay attention to. He's tugging on their strings a little bit. And he's doing a hell of a job, clearly, because he's pulled it off thus far.
Well, let's do one thing on the series first. Sacramento, they could have lost either one of these two games. Mm-hmm. I mean, in the first game, Curry shot 3 for 13 from 3 and had a wide open 3 to tie the game. And Wiggins had a 3 to win the game with 10 seconds to go. He had that wide open corner jumper. In game 2, even after Draymond got thrown out of the game, and I don't even think he should have been, but after he did, the game was tied twice. And after Thompson made a 3, they were down by a point. So it's not like Sacramento has won this game like the Cavs have, like last night. These games could have gone either way. So I think the Warriors have a lot of life left in them. I'm not sure if they're going to win, but I'm with JJ. I think they're going to win them all night. They got a cause now. This is a world championship team in their home building against a novice team on the road with a cause. That is dangerous. Green comes back in game 4. He's all fired up. And, hey, you know what? You have my back. Now I'm going to have your back. And Sabonis is not going to get a call. They're going to look at Sabonis like you wouldn't believe. I think this series is 2-2. Now, as far as the whole thing with bringing Green back, you know a lot more about the psychology of what the team structurally needs to do. I'm curious if maybe the Warriors have just had enough. You know what? I know you said earlier today that it's only been the one suspension in 7 years, but this is a suspension. He did punch Poole that we all saw in training camp, and that was not just a tap on the shoulder. He punched him. That may have caused a little divisiveness in the locker room. So you can make the argument to where you say, you know what? We won our 4 championships. Could have been more if he maybe didn't get thrown out of that Cleveland series, but he won our 4 championships. Maybe it's time to just move on and look at it a little differently. I wonder if Golden State's thinking about it from that standpoint.
I want to be clear. I'm not counting the Warriors out. I know I said they got to win tomorrow. I'm not counting them out. I'm not counting Steph Curry out. I would be very clear on that. I still think the Warriors can win this series. Your question, have they had enough? The reality with Draymond, and we discussed this last year, is more contentiously than we are discussing this today. The reality is with Draymond is that he has always towed the line between just aggressiveness, over-the-top antics, and competitiveness and basketball play. He's always towed that line. And sometimes he steps over the line, like he did game 1 last year against Memphis, like he did in 2016 with the kicks and the LeBron play. But you can't argue with the result of him living on the edge. You can't argue with 4 championships. You can't argue his value.